range of talks. We've kind of come in at the Internet of Things, smart cities from a range of different angles. And now it's my privilege to talk to you about smart city standards. Who's excited about standards? Woo! Well, my aim is to get the rest of us excited because actually standards are really important. It says there IEC, which is the International Electrotechnical Commission. That's one of my hats. It was just they couldn't put all of them, but anyway, never mind. So standards. I realise these are actually Indian plugs. I don't know if any of you can notice. And I forgot. I have a different one for different countries. But I think probably those of us who travel get fed up with the fact we have to somehow fit our different plugs onto different systems in the different countries we go to. But actually there are only 13. In all the world, there are only 13 different standards for plugs. And actually, some clever people have worked out sockets that will take all of them pretty well. And if you imagine, just think about the UK. You imagine if actually there were lots of different types of plugs. What a mess. Now, it's an extraordinarily boring thing to look at switches and sockets and plugs. We see them every day. But you just think, because in our homes and in our buildings, somebody has gone to the trouble of standardizing not just the size and shape of how things fit together, but also all the things that go behind it about the quality of electricity, how much, and all into a house and so on. Very boring stuff. But think of the enormous amount of innovation that has come out of that. It means that I can build some completely exciting new electronic any kind of application that runs on electricity for a home and know that all I have to do is to follow the standards, put on the right plug at the end, and it will work everywhere in the UK. And if I wanted to have a worldwide thing, I'd only have to deal with 13 different types of plug. It means all of that's been sorted and I can really get on with innovation. And so the point is, it's understanding that getting the standards right is one of the important ways that we can get innovation, which is, I mean, we've been hearing some of the fantastic innovation that's going on, but actually to get that rolled out across the country and across the world involves getting the standards right. Now, I know it is complicated, but it is worth understanding something about the standards landscape. We know that pretty well every country in the world has its own national standards organisation. Dan's mentioned British Standards Institution. You've got D and DKE, the two ones in Germany. You've got ANSI, which is the American one, AFNOR, the French. Pretty well every country in the world, China, they've all got standards bodies because they all understand the importance of getting those standards right. And then there are international standards organizations. There are three big ones. I'm supposed to be representing the IEC at the moment, the International Electrotechnical Commission. They were founded 1906, and they look after electrical and electronic standards. So at the moment, smart grid has been one of the things they've been doing lots of work on. But batteries, all sorts of things like that. One of the interesting things that they tell about that, one of the people I know, some time back, you could not take a laptop on a plane because of the batteries. And you know, because people were, you know, the Civil Aviation Authority worried that these batteries might go on fire and all sorts of disasters might happen, so you couldn't do it. And then the battery manufacturers went to the Civil Aviation Authority and they said, look, you don't need to worry about that. We've sorted it. Our batteries are very reliable now. And the Civil Aviation Authority said, well, great, but you say that, and you may be true in what you're saying, but how do we know that somebody's not going to start to manufacture laptops with really awful batteries that won't comply with that and which will catch fire? And you standardize your batteries in terms of ensuring that we can absolutely be sure they won't catch fire and we'll let you bring laptops and other electronics onto the planes. And that's what they did. They developed a standard, and that enabled people like you and me, when we go on a plane, we don't have to bother. We can take a laptop, we can take a phone, we can take a tablet, whatever, and it's fine. So that's International Electrotechnical Commission. ISO, the International Organization for Standards, believe it, International Standard, no, it's International Organization for Standards, ISO. They pretty well do everything else, standards-wide. Management, all sorts of other stuff. And then between them, they've got a Joint Technical Committee, JTC 1, Joint Technical Committee 1, which looks at ICT stuff, because neither felt they were qualified to look at that, so they did that. And then you've got the international, and these form a kind of a cluster, because all of these really relate to the national standards bodies, the British Standards Institution and so on. And really what they do is their membership is largely the national standards bodies, and what happens is if the British Standards Institution thinks actually we've got a really good standard here and we think it's worth making it into an international standard, they get a few other countries to say yes, we think that's good. They have plenaries, there's voting. If the other countries think, the other national standards bodies think this is a good thing, then they set up a working group and will take that national standard and make it into an international one. So that's how they work. They're basically membership committees of all the national standards bodies. And the great thing about that is that the standards they make are based on the experience of national standards bodies. So there's a very good chance that they really will work throughout the whole world. The ITU is different. The ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, is a UN sort of body that's been established to help with telecommunications stuff. Its memberships as national governments and companies and things like that. Standards is only part of its work. It does all sorts of other things, but standards is an important part of its work too. And they are very useful in terms of developing the kind of international standards that mean that we can use our equipment all over the world and it all works and so on and so forth. So that's the the four big international ones. There's European ones, Senselec and ETSI, whose role really is the same kind of thing, but because we've got a common market, it's making sure that it's easy to sell across borders within Europe. And then there are many other standards, but there are huge numbers of standards bodies which are really industry or very sector specific. The IEEE is an engineering group, electro and technical, all sorts of engineers, and they work what their engineering members say we need to do. You've got Worldwide Web Consortium that's developing standards for the web. With lots of other things we can do. I've chucked up a number of different IoT standards bodies. And what they are groups, consortia of companies and potentially sometimes often universities and other key players that recognize there's a particular specific area where there needs to be consistency. That until there's an agreement about how a particular issue should be dealt with, you're not going to get things going forward. So they are often the pioneers in terms of standards making, because what they're doing is responding to a clear need, and it's bringing together the right experts to meet those needs. And that's why, thankfully, we've got various groups working on IoT standards. The issue is that that's not enough. It's brilliant. These groups are doing a fantastic job. The value of the kind of more established, the bigger groups, the potential value, and it doesn't always work, but the potential value is twofold, or probably more, but at least twofold. Groups like ISO, IEC, and so on, they can take a bigger picture. Because very often, you've got a particular fairly narrow area where you need standards, a sort of one level of the platform or something that needs to be sorted so that devices within that level can work well together, whoever they're manufactured by, and you can start to build an ecosystem. But very often you do need a bit of a bigger picture to understand how everything fits together. How do you manage it? What are the other bits of kit that need, what's the impact going to be on electrical supply or this or that or the other? So you need to have that kind of a wider perspective to make sure that all the bits fit together, that you don't just have this as standard and this has been standardized, but some other things that really are needed to make it work aren't done, haven't been tackled yet. So that's quite important. And the other thing is that once industry bodies have agreed a common way of doing something, and it's, they know it works, they're confident in it, they will very often take their standard to ISO or to one of the other standards bodies to have the stamp of approval on it, because most other people don't know about these different groups. They don't know how reliable they work. Can they really trust that what standard they've made will work? But they've heard of ISO, all right. So once it's got that, then it means that anyone who needs to procure something can say, that needs to follow this standard. And so it gives it that kind of real solidity and reliability. So I've said all those things. Standards are important, and they are needed for smart cities as well. Cities are pretty complicated. They've got all sorts of infrastructures that are needed: water, gas, electricity, IT, nature, various things like that. There's functions: health, education, the economy, jobs, shopping, retail, manufacturing, culture. You've got different sorts of organizations in the city that all are responsible for different bits of it. You've got levels of scale: neighborhoods, districts, cities, metropolis, and so on. All sorts of different things need to be taken into consideration to make a city work well. And that's the challenge, really, that cities they're not just a system of systems, but they're a system of systems of systems. You've got to try and make the whole thing work together. And so in some of the standards work we've been doing around, or trying to get hold of it, of course you can't talk about smart city because no city's there, come on. But it's something about a journey. And so the kind of way many of the groups are approaching that is to see that the smartness of a city describes its ability to bring together all its resources to effectively and seamlessly achieve the goals and fulfill the purpose it has set itself. In other words, there you've got all these infrastructures, organizations, functions, everything else. How can you make sure that all of these things are able to work together effectively, to back each other up, to support each other, and to deliver the big picture stuff that the city needs to do: jobs, health, education, all the rest of it, which actually all of these different systems all impact on, and very often at the moment it's done in a very incoherent way. So the smartness of a city describes how well all the individual bits of the city are working well, but more importantly it's about how well they work in an integrated way. So it's how you can start to link everything up and pull together, get better information, pull that information together in more effective ways, share it to the right people, help better decision making that's not made on narrow views and understandings, but is made taking into consideration everything. And of course that means lots of different things need to be taken into consideration. Not only all the different systems and so on of the city, but you've got to look at buildings, physical infrastructure standards, ICT standards, and there's lots of different stuff in there. Service standards, so health, mobility, and all the rest of it. And then the bigger strategic overall stuff that needs to be sorted out. And you need frameworks, terms, definitions. Lots of things need to be sorted and got right. And it's not about chucking away everything and starting afresh, but it's about making sure that all of these things are able to be linked together so that they do provide that coherent way of helping the city to work well. So we talk about, and there's more layers than that, but we talk about 3 levels that you need to work on in terms of standards. The technical level, all the detailed and very important technical specifications that need to be made. The processes that need to take place in the city, how you can describe them in clear and consistent ways, and then the strategic level. So what does all that mean? I have my box here. Lots and lots of standards, and what's important to remember is that when we talk about standards for a smart city, it's not a one-size-fits-all. that here is a smart city, and it all has to conform to that. But what we're talking about is, we've already heard about Lego bricks. It's about getting lots and lots of differently sized and shaped and coloured bits and pieces that you can fit together in different ways that you know will fit. You choose the right ones for your city, and you know it will fit together to build something that you want. Last summer, the Royal Academy of Arts did a very interesting thing. They got some of the four winners of the Sterling Prize, the architectural groups, in with some A-level students, and then apparently some other kids who were visiting kind of edged their way in because it's Lego, and they got them to design a city. And there were 4 of them, I think, so that's one. There's another. There's another. There's another. All different. All built from exactly the same stuff. If they'd have had to have built it, cutting things and everything, it would have taken forever. But because there was some well-designed standards, they could just fit them together and build something that was what they wanted. So that's the role of smart city standards. The challenge is, as with all standards, is to get it right. You've got to get the right size and shape. You don't want it too small or too big. In other words, it has to describe the right set of issues and how they need to fit together. And it needs to be at the right time. And that's one of the big challenges we always have. This is a very fast-moving field. Internet of Things, smart cities, things are changing all the time. You don't want to go in too quick because that will hinder innovation. You've got to let lessons be learnt, people try things and everything else, but you don't want to wait too long because that just leaves a mess and delay and wastage. So it's really to know what to standardize and when to do it. I'm going on fast because there's not much time. Lots of benefits to doing it. There's already, as Dan has mentioned, the British Standards Institution has developed a number of mainly strategic high-level standards. One of the things that I was technical author of is a Smart Cities Overview Guide for city leaders to kind of give an overall picture of what there is. The PASs are more detailed, but it's really just to get people starting to align what they're doing and learn what can be done. All of these you can get from the British Standards Institution's website. You just search Smart Cities and they're there, and they're free to download as PDFs. There are other international groups working on this stuff. The International Electronic Commission have a systems evaluation group on smart cities. It's just about to finalise its report, and they're going to recommend a systems committee that's focus will be on how to link smart grid, smart transport, smart health, and all the rest of it together. The Joint Technical Committee 1 have a smart cities study group. I'm editor of that group. We've finished the preliminary report. We're now looking again at scoping out what's the key things to work on. Ooh, let me go back. ITUT have a focus group on smart and sustainable cities. They've developed 21 technical reports. It's again like preliminary work. They finished last week. They finished that phase of their work in the meetings in Abu Dhabi, and they're now looking at the next stage. And there's a couple of alternatives for that. And one of them, which is very likely, is a piece of work which looks at IoT and smart cities and looks at the relevance in that. So that should be something that hopefully is very useful. Sensei and ETSI have a smart and sustainable cities and communities coordination group. And the nice thing about that is their role is not to look at just what they need to do, but it's much more looking at what good practice has already been developed. There are lots of really good city groups that are out there, Covenant of Mayors. There's a range of fantastic networks of cities that have been developing good practice. And the problem is with all of that those areas of good practice, which are virtually standards effectively, but are only seen as standards for people with cities within that network. So it's thinking, can we work with them to try and expand out and help people to see this is good practice that can be used by any city. And then the one group of these that's actually doing specific work is ISO Technical Committee 268, which is developing standards for sustainable development and smart community infrastructures. Looking at them quickly, this is the one I mentioned. The interesting one, or there are a number of interesting ones, but working group 2 is looking at city indicators. That's not specifically smart, but it's a key part of the journey of a city. This came out of some work that was done for the World Bank, that they surveyed several hundred cities, and they found that there was a total of 1,000 different indicators that cities were using across the world, and there were only 2 that were in common. And it means, therefore, that it's very difficult to benchmark, to learn from each other when cities are measuring the key things in all sorts of different ways. So what they've done is, this was published March. It's just been over a year now that it's been published. It's a standard on global city indicators, focusing on indicators for city services and quality of life. So it's very much focusing on areas like health, education, air quality, the environment, things like that. And it's really about how a city can measure how well it's doing. So it's not about smartness, but it enables a city to look at the key. There's 17 different areas of city life, and look at those different areas and think, where are we doing okay, and where do we need to really start to pay some attention, because we've got some big challenges to tackle. And what it does is it allows them, as they measure it, to work out where they need to put more attention and then set some clear goals. At the moment, if we look at air quality, that's one of the individual indicators. This is the level we're at. In 5 years or 2 years or whatever, we want to be at this level. And you've got, it's not just we want to improve, but you actually can then set a roadmap and say, okay, we're here, we want to get there, what's the best way we can get to it? And that's where actually the smart stuff comes into it. So that's why, having done this very important role of helping cities to understand their strengths and weaknesses and to set clear process in place to know how well they're doing in tackling their areas of weakness, they're now looking at, it's almost certainly they're going to do it. The ballots just finished last week. I haven't heard the result, but they're looking at developing a set of smart city indicators to look at the capabilities of cities to use innovation, technology and other things to help them tackle the issues they want. And this is where things like Internet of Things, what is there a sensor network in place across the city? How well is it managed? There's all sorts of interesting indicators that could come in here relating to smart cities. So the city indicators, there's 20 were foundational cities that have been measuring these things for a year now, and they're looking at another 100 cities to be doing this by the end of this year. And what that will do, not only it will give the individual cities some a helpful management information to help them improve, but it will enable cities to work out, okay, last year or 2 years ago, this city wasn't doing very well in education, and we're not doing very well in education, but now they're here. What did they do? What made the difference? And this city improved too. What are the cities we can learn from? And it will really help cities to hopefully to start to move forward more quickly together. There's another set, a couple of working groups that are looking at smart community infrastructures, and that again possibly links much more closely to Internet of Things. One is looking at how you assess the effectiveness of gas infrastructures, electricity infrastructures, whatever, community heating infrastructures, by looking, there's a bigger set of things, but it's looking particularly at, when you assess it, how expensive was it to build, how expensive is it to maintain, how easy is it to maintain, how well is it delivering for the citizen, the user, and what's the impact on the environment. And it's helping cities to try and work out, again, which of their infrastructures needs more attention and a better way of assessing how to take it forward and improve it. And then this is particularly interesting. It's looking at, observing the fact that within a city you've got a number of different infrastructures that at the moment are managed completely separately, water, gas, electricity, and so on, that are increasingly becoming dependent on each other because they're individually becoming smarter, and electricity and IT and all of these things are becoming much more linked, and if something happens in one area, it can start to, domino effect throughout the city, all sorts of problems can come. So how can you manage all of the different infrastructures in a consistent, coherent way to make sure they work effectively? So that's some important thing. I just whiz. PAS 182 is, so another area is models, frameworks, and ontologies to get a common way of talking about stuff, understanding how cities work. BSI have done a PAS 182, which is worth looking at. Architecture and what of a smart city? What are all the issues? How can they fit together? Some citywide issues that we need to look at. A lot of work's done on resilience of organizations and companies, managing privacy within a company, and so on. But how do you do that across a city? What are the extra bits that you need to build on to make sure that you can have real end-to-end security and that the city as a whole can be resilient? Very useful guides have been developed and need to be developed for city leaders relating to technology. I mean, what is internet? What can Internet of Things offer a city? What does a city leader need, a mayor, a city leader need to know about that, for instance? What are the new financial and procurement models that need to be put in place? And some of that, the City Standards Institute here in the UK is going to make a big difference too. So just in closing, Internet of Things and smart cities closely related. The great thing about smart cities involve a lot more. It's much more about people and all sorts of other interesting things. But Internet of Things is really vital to smart cities. So two things about smart cities. They stretch the Internet of Things. A lot of really important Internet of Things applications are really effectively intranet of things because they're within a company use or within a systems use. You know, the connected car, the connected home. And so people are designing systems which are in themselves closed that are really, really important. But within a city, you need to be able to know how you can take data that's been generated within one system, take it and use it in another system. And what are the things that are needed to make that happen? And then, of course, Internet of Everything. It's particularly true of a city. To manage the city properly, you need to get all the data coming from the stuff in the city, to get all that sort of machine to machine, all the other things as part of the picture. But you also need social media, feeds, what can you find out about what the citizen's thinking, all sorts of other data. And you need to be able to, city leaders need to pull all that different kinds of data together to get a much better overall picture of the city. And then there's issues about if you're starting from a company, you've got a closed system. If you're starting from a city, would it be good to have a citywide sensor network rather than one which is bits managed by one and bits managed by another? Can one company manage on behalf of other companies? How do you do that and what's the implications? And do we need a marketplace for data that's generated? So these are the sorts of questions that are over and above what may be considered within Internet of Things itself that a smart city brings to life. So key thing there is we need your help and insight. We don't want to make standards the wrong shape. We don't want to make them the wrong time. We need people actually doing the stuff, as we, probably most of us here in some way or other are involved in this, to give us the clarity that's needed. BSI is just starting a new piece of work on Internet of Things, trying to scope out the work. ITU, as I've mentioned, other standards bodies. If any of you would like to get involved, please let me know. Thank you very much.